Okay, so we are now into chapter 2 of the M&EZ monitoring and evaluation made easy. And today we're going to carry on from where we left it at the last session. And what we said is, yes, we are going to need to organize our thinking process, right? And that's where we mentioned a framework. So what is a framework? And of course, for a framework, we all know, in English, it's a construction. Think of a construction, maybe if you see something of a construction. So there's something that you put together. There's a theoretical part of it, which is conceptual, a conceptual framework. And of course, there's an operational side to it. So the managerial part of putting together all these ideas and concepts. Okay, but let's go for that conceptual framework that is now important to us. So then you organize your thought. That's very important. So you have goals and you have purpose and you have objectives. So you have investments and activities, something that you're adding to this project, to this activity. So you need to, as we mentioned, you need to anticipate. You need to have expected results. There's no escaping that. You need to go and look and have a vision into what is it that is going to happen at the end of it all. Okay, so let's think then that we have been thinking of different things. So now we have to put them in boxes. Of course, more and more people are saying, "Oh, I want to think outside the box." Now, for this, you have to think inside the box. So this is where you are saying, okay, so what is it that I'm going to do? I'm going to do a couple of very important things. First, I'm going to think of a sequence. I'm going to think of the time. When is it that we're going to do things, and when is it that we are expecting things to come up after we've done the certain things. So that's one thing, and that's what we would call maybe the horizontal side. But then, of course, the other question is, not only when, but where. So this is what we now call the levels, because you will be acting and there will be consequences at different levels. So now, what are going to be these levels? We're going to get into it. And of course, another very important thing is that as you go horizontal and vertical, now you have to put relationships. So is this obviously before and then after? So you have relationships, you have arrows. And so these are the elements of a typical conceptual framework, where you have boxes. They're tied with some forms of relationships that are usually arrows, and it goes over time, but it also goes over different levels. So this is where we're going to now focus our next aspects here. So this is very important that we are always thinking of, we are going to make sure that things are put into the right places. Okay, so for example, and that's why sometimes I say, oh yeah, it's like putting all your blah blah into boxes. So you're gonna all the things that you've been loosely thinking about, now they're gonna come in order of time and order of levels. So what are some typical frameworks? And so there are some that are vertical. So, and that usually involves levels, as we're saying. So what we typically think is from macro to micro, from the big things into the minor things, into the detailed things. For example, I'm going to show you a number of graphs. There's one graph from USAID that is a results framework. We're going to talk more about that. And so where you go from, say, systems to, or contextual things down to individuals. So the contextual things are up, and then towards the bottom you have the individuals. Then you can have also from governance So if you want to go all the way up at a national level, you can do governance, and then what does it come? It comes, to policies, and you go all the way down into the point of services, the individuals. So again, you see you see quite a number of arrows and a number of relationships going from up to all the way down. Okay, so you see some of these charts that I'm presenting to you. The other one is, of course, horizontal, which is left to right, and usually this is what we were talking about, the sequence and the timing. And the typical is, okay, you start with an investment with what typically we call inputs. Inputs are the things that you're going to put into your development project. And as soon as you have whatever it is, so you have staff, you have vehicles, you have logistics, you have things that you're going to bring into certain places, then you're going to have processes. The processes are the actual activities. And then it goes all the way to outputs. What are the outputs? Are the first results, if you like, the immediate results. And then you have those that come later on after a period, and those are typically called, outcomes, and then some people call impact. And by the way, here what I always say don't ever waste time trying to convince people, no, it's an outcome, no, it's an impact, no, it's an output. You define it yourself, and once you define it, you know what it is, and stick to it. Okay, most important is you consistently stick to it. So don't quarrel about what's this definition versus the other. People use it differently, so you use yours. Try to make sense of it all, and then use it consistently all the time. So those are typical frameworks. So you have vertical, you have horizontal. There's others you will see. There's round, even triangle. I'm going to show you one triangle, and then that some are more difficult than others to understand, and so you have to just cope with all of those different visual expressions that people want to put, their boxes and their thinking process. Now, this is the point where we also have to make a difference between, because we are reading more and more about it. What is the theory of change, and how is it different from frameworks? Most important is theory of change is the big picture. It's if you like farther up, it's more. It's called the preconditions and the processes leading to a long-term goal. People talk about social change, for example. These are causal pathways. And by the way, you can read this in Wikipedia and USAID if you like reading learning labs. So you have those linkages, those causal pathways, okay? And I'm going to show you there is all these different boxes as well. There's one very important where you see that, especially because I want to differentiate between what the frameworks that we're talking about and the theory of change. And you can see with it, the theory of change is mostly the universe of all this overarching thought process, okay? And where part of it, the more detailed part of it, is the logical framework or the other results framework, whatever type of framework. So you can see that it's important to have a structural idea when you are trying to put together a framework, okay? It's a very intellectual process. It's not easy. People have to think carefully about it. It's not superficial. Sometimes you have to get deep in the weeds and say, okay, so is this really going to affect that? And if so, what do I expect, when it affects that? Of course, I've even found a cartoon where, some people think, well, is there going to be a miracle here between this, what I'm thinking, and this, what I'm getting? Okay, so let's see if that happens. Um, this theories of change, these TOCs, can get also very complex, complicated. I'm showing you one that was used with the UK's Department for Foreign Assistance, the DFID, and there's, like, for example, the roads, constructing roads for the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC. So now that we've mentioned in passing USAID and then DFID, I want to show you quickly these two different types of framework, because of course different donors and different agencies have their own ways of thinking. So very quickly. So first we're going to look at what is called the Logframe, the logical framework, and this is typical DFID. Okay, this is from the UK, United Kingdom. From 2009, 2011, they've been, putting it together, and it uses the same process that we have just talked about. The results change, so one thing is linked to the next and to the next until the very end. But they also have different terminology, so you just have to, be familiar with that. For example, they want the objectively verifiable indicators. Is another way of saying an indicator that you can validate it, that you can measure rightly, okay? But then you have other things, and you have to, I'm not going to go through it all, but there are terms that are used, like milestones, like targets. We're going to go into that in the next chapter when we talk about indicators. Sometimes indicators need to have a target. Sometimes they call it a milestone, etc. The means of verification, the source, etc. DFID likes a lot to talk about risk. So what are the risks of either assuming or either obtaining or not obtaining these results are as expected, okay? So all those things need to be thought of in advance when you are preparing whatever document that needs that framework, okay? So yeah, and of course there is, when you read some of the requisites, you will see that, for example, they don't want more than 5, or even the maximum of 10 outputs. Don't give too many outputs. And then indicators, how many indicators? Well, 3 indicators maximum per output. So, some ideas about not making it so complicated that people can't really relate to it. Okay, so one outcome for each project instead of several outcomes, so that's telling you that you want to go again to the very higher level when you're talking about an outcome or an impact. You don't want several impacts and several outcomes. So that's, more or less what you see in DFID. Now for USAID, you have what is called the results framework. For years now, they've been talking about, don't talk so much about the process. Process is okay, but what is it? What results? And so again, a cause and effect logic. You use the same results change and all that, but they also have their terminology. So sometimes they use the goals, or sometimes they use the assistance objective. So if it's an assistance project, what's your objective overall? Sometimes, underneath it is the development objective. So so you need, or sometimes the strategic objective. So you need to put those things in the right place. But the most important is that typically once you have those objectives, those overarching, then you start going down and saying, okay, yeah, but now the lower levels is going to be like an intermediate result. So those that you're thinking up there as results, now you have an intermediate results. And there's even one more breakdown, which is called the sub-results, okay? Sometimes even the sub-intermediate results. And so, you just have to make sure what is it that you're going to use, and again, use consistently. So the most important to me is that, and I'm giving you again a few examples, that you find in the literature, you find it on the websites. But the most important is that don't forget that here now you have your management people, and then you have your M&E people, and they're both talking to each other. So you have to all the time always translate what, if it's too technical, a wording, you have to translate it and make it, you know, more managerial, more understandable for somebody who is managing a project. You know, they might not be using the same terminology. So always remember that you need those things. So you will see throughout all this that I'm talking a few examples. The most important is, don't forget that when you have a framework, you have to think in advance, and then you have to organize all the different boxes in the right place with a sequence. There's a lot of logic involved, so you know, make sure you get people who are logical. You know, some mathematics background there, so that you have things that flow a certain way in a logical pattern, and then where you know what is it that you're going to get, and in all these different places, there's different contexts. Okay, so that's it for now. Read, and maybe you will need to see some of those graphics again, you know, to examine them in more detail. And we're going to talk in the next chapter about some important thing. What is it that comes under all these results? These are the indicators. How are you going to measure? How are you going to measure those things that you want to accomplish at the end? All right, see you then. Thanks very much. Don't forget to subscribe and keep in touch, you know, for the next chapter. Thank you.